So what we have is the very beginning of Judaism in our first reading. We have Ezra doing a reading, and he's going to be reading from early in the morning till midday. That could be a long service. But the idea is that the readings are very important, and we heard readings. And he said he read from the law. Well, I can't imagine something more boring. Please excuse me, lawyers. I can't imagine anything more boring than reading a law book from morning till night. Wouldn't that be boring? Terrible. That's not what he did. When they say the law, what he meant was the Torah. And where would he start with the Torah? Well, the first book, the book of Genesis. He would have read about creation, the Garden of Eden. He would have read about Abraham and Jacob and his son Joseph with the multicolored coat that we sing about. Great stories. He read great stories. And there's a story of the people going to Egypt and coming back and getting rescued. Great stories. And the people of that time heard these stories and understood two things. They understood a little bit about God, and they also understood a little bit about themselves as a people. They didn't just start being these Jewish people or these Hebrew people. They already were, but they just didn't know it. And so we too, when we get readings, we get to read and hear stories. And these stories usually are just the beginning. Because at the end of Mass, I'm going to say, go in peace. And we go and we take those readings, those stories with us. And Luke is very interesting. He's the only gospel writer that does this. He tells about why he's writing his gospel. Isn't that cool? Now, the Gospel of Mark was already there for 10 or 20 years. It was rolling around. But Mark wrote in a real crude Greek. Okay, you can't tell that now because we translate it so well, it sounds smooth. Luke wrote in a very eloquent, very smooth-sounding Greek that people could easily understand, and he was a master storyteller. From Luke, this year, you're going to hear, well, we've already been hearing about John the Baptist, but Elizabeth, Mary, the angels, the whole infancy narrative as he puts it together. You're going to hear about Martha and Mary, the prodigal son, the centurion slave. All of these rich stories he's given to us. In addition to all the stuff that's in Mark, he added all this other in that he had gotten from sources. Some of that same information is in Matthew, but it's so wonderfully written as stories. You know, when I think about how we learn about God personally, I always think about I do that through prayer. I pray and then I do it. And I'll tell you, my favorite prayer form is a thing called centering prayer. You probably might not have heard of it. Anyway, you close your eyes, you get real relaxed, and you try to think of nothing and just be silent. But of course, all of us, as soon as we try to do that, we start thinking of something, so you have a word, so like say Lord or Jesus or Mary. And then you put away your thought, and then you just sit there in silence. And that's what I do. But recently, I've heard of a different way of this type of prayer, because it's such a battle to try keeping thoughts out of your head. We can be quiet with our lips. How easy is it to be quiet up here? I don't know about you, but for me, it's almost impossible. It's really difficult. So what this suggestion is that we should look at what's happening in our lives and try to think, what is God telling us through what's actually happening in our lives? Now, I've had a dramatic case, in the case that back on May 17th, I was playing pickleball with my wife and our friends Bill and Debbie. I don't know if you know what pickleball is. That's a ridiculous-looking game. It's like tennis, only on a small court, and you have this racket, and it makes a loud noise, and with a wiffle ball, and it's a lot of fun. So we're playing, and I gently lay down on the floor, and they didn't know what was going on, so they come over me, and I'm gasping for breath, and then I stop breathing. Fortunately, my nephew's nearby, and he started doing CPR on me and pressing on my chest so good, and he did such a nice job that he broke all my ribs. And 14 minutes later, the fire department comes, and they put the paddles on me, and then I get a pulse, and I live again. So I guess I was dead. And I'd love to tell you a story of how I saw the great light and I talked to God. But one of the things I ran into is I had short-term memory loss. So I can't even remember my 4 days in the hospital when I talked to Father Dan and Father Mark Melesma, who anointed me, and Father Dan Schuster, and Father Dave Plyer. They all came, they visited me. I had great conversations with them and can't remember a word. I'm driving home with my wife and her sister in the front seat, and I'm reading the story my daughter had written on a thing called The Caring Bridge, and it's telling about what happened to me. And to read this story shook me up so badly, I haven't been unshaken yet. And so many people, because if you have a cardiac arrest outside of a hospital, your odds of living are about 6%. Most people that go through that have brain damage and or kidney failure. I don't know why. I am left trying to understand the story, and so many people say, well, Bob, you must have something you have to do yet. Well, I have to think about the stories going on in my life and hear, well, what is God telling me to do? I have to listen. And as I thought about that, and I thought about it a lot over these last few months, I have to ask you to listen too, not to my story. You got to listen to the God stories. You got to listen to the Gospels, but to listen to your own story. God's working in each and every one of our lives. And He's telling us something, and hearing it is so hard that we have to quiet something. It's not our thoughts, but we have to quiet something so that we might hear our God. For our God is speaking to us. And what's fascinating is with Ezra giving this long spiel and getting everybody all excited, and they did get all excited, and Jesus saying, hey, this is the time of fulfillment, and the people were shocked. Well, right now, in your prayer, and this prayer is a part of the Mass, this is just the beginning. We're starting all anew. And as we leave in a beginning, and we get to live out that which God has intended for us. What is it? Let us all work together to understand the prayer, to understand the words that our Lord is speaking to me and to you.